history about me, just because when I was a teacher or and I was in education, always like to know who I'm in the room with. I have been an educator for 25 years. I was in public education for 20, 15 of those in the classroom and 5 in administration around family and community engagement. I worked for Scholastic as a family and community engagement specialist, and I'm now lucky to continue this, what I like to call my true passion in education, and bring that with me to Talking Points to help really improve. An app or a platform is only as good as its users. So, really taking a look at the impact of family communication and engagement practices. So with that, today's session is all about setting the stage, taking a look at some sort of foundational beliefs, thinking about how we might need to shift our mindsets, and really framing family engagement as your true superpower. I always like to get a sense of who's in the room with me. I have a little bit of an idea, but if you want to go ahead and throw your role or name in the chat for me, and if anybody is willing, we have a small group, so I'm always very big on anyone who's willing to share, wants to come off mute and let me know what you hope to get out of today's session. I would love a volunteer for that. So I'll give you a second to let me know who's joining me today, and then I will take anyone who'd be up for being brave enough to share. I see family coordinators, family engagement specialists, so this is the right room with all of my peers. Do I have any brave volunteers willing to share what they hope to get from today's session?
Yes. Something I would like to get more information or learn more about is how to break some barriers that families have uh, that prevents them from engaging more in school activities and events and get more people involved, trying to break those barriers that are preventing them from engage with the school community.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ellen. I appreciate
Mhm.
you sharing that. And that is definitely something we will touch on today. So I think all of you are in the right place, and I'm very excited to have the time to have this conversation with you this morning. Just to give you a little bit of information about where we're headed today, the first topic we will discuss is what we call the universal family engagement evolution. So talk a little bit about how COVID shifted our understanding around family engagement. And so now how more districts have really begun to recognize it as a necessity. In addition, we're going to take a look at effective dual level engagement. We know a lot of times family engagement is most weighted on the relationship between teachers and families, but we also know that truly, in order for it to be effective, it includes all support staff, coaches, district leaders, because they also shape the culture around the classroom. We will also take a look at what we call the digital imperative. Now, we know in-person events are important, but they alone can't build the relationships that students need, those daily relationships. So, looking at how digital engagement, when done well, is really a low lift for families. And then, of course, finally, take a look at maximizing the impact from digital engagement. So, how do we do digital engagement in ways that are meaningful to improve student outcomes? So, that will be our journey today. All right, so we are going to begin with the universal family engagement evolution and kind of dive into how our collective understanding has shifted. But most importantly, for a long time, there was a little bit of a disconnect about the purpose behind family engagement. And so we want to really emphasize how universal family engagement is a strategy to improve student outcomes. Before we talk about tools or policies, we know there is some really long-term research around the fact that effective family engagement is truly the most underutilized superpower when it comes to improving outcomes. On the left, you will see some findings from Dr. Mapp and Dr. Henderson from 2002. So this is not new research. It's just taken a long time to get people to really pay attention to this research. But they're out of Harvard, and they have found that family engagement is twice as likely to predict student success as socioeconomic status. And then, of course, we always like to share this research around budget as well for any of you, as we know schools are sort of sometimes overwhelmed by budget restrictions. But we do know that effective family engagement equates to over $1,000 per student per year Return to the student's operating budget because it reduces the needs for interventions and supports when families are working collaboratively with schools and those barriers are being addressed. So just a few things to point out from the research lens. As you are listening today and as you are here right now, I want you to kind of think about how family school partnerships show up in your current role or show up in your school system because they do look different everywhere. And again, I work across the country. And again, there are some things that are very similar, but also everyone sort of feels like they have a different purpose, or a different role in that they play with family school partnerships. So just asking you to kind of reflect and remain aware of what that currently looks like for you. When we think about this is just kind of a another sort of reflective pause, right? A couple other things to think about for you. There are two key quotes here. The first one being that family engagement isn't just a job, it's a culture that every staff member helps build. And secondly, that every role in a school contributes to family engagement, from the bus driver's smile to the principal's communication. I take a minute to bring this to you because one of the most common misconceptions is that family engagement in schools or in districts belongs to one person. And I'm betting that many of you on this webinar today feel that pressure sometimes because if you have a title that has family engagement or family specialist or community engagement specialist or any of those words in your title, a lot of times anything that comes across the desk related to family engagement goes directly to you. And our goal really is to shift that mindset, right? To help everyone in the school understand that family engagement is everyone's role, that it belongs to everyone. Um, and sometimes, I often get to be in the room with people who believe in it as strongly as I do. But just the reminder that sometimes we take on that heavier burden because we think it's all up to us because it's in our job title, right? It's in our role, it's what we're supposed to do. But ultimately, it's everyone's job. I want to, oh, why isn't this working? There we go. Okay. There's a quote on this slide from E.L. Bergman, who is a Harvard-trained educator who worked directly with Karen Mapp on the family engagement systems. And I want to just read this insight to you. It says, I didn't realize until too late that there were a lot of people who had a lot of authority that didn't see this as their work. The director of HR needs to see how it helps his or her goals. The director of transportation needs to see it. They all need to see how it helps drive system-wide improvement. Integrated means from HR to IT to curriculum. It's everybody's job. And so his insight is important because it's not enough just to want family engagement for your system, but every department, every leader needs to figure out how it truly connects to their work. All right. So, because family engagement is so powerful, the field has really shifted to this new concept of universal family engagement. And if you haven't heard of universal family engagement or seen it defined before, it is really the practice of improving outcomes for all students by fostering effective partnerships with families, regardless of barriers or circumstances. And Alan mentioned that's one of his, what he hopes to get is how do we get over those barriers or circumstances that sometimes get in the way of these partnerships. So this redefinition moves us away from thinking of family engagement as a nice to have or kind of simply just seeing it as a way to make families feel seen, or sometimes we say to just feel as a sense of belonging, but really towards recognizing it as a high leverage district-wide strategy. Because when it is done well, we know that every student benefits both academically, emotionally, and socially. If you remember, for a long time, we used to call family engagement family involvement. And we shifted those words, right? We shifted from involvement to engagement. But I think that Larry Ferlazzo really kind of explains it in the best way. A school striving for family involvement often leads with its mouth, right? Which is what schools often do. We often just tell families what we need from them, tell them what they're supposed to do. We are identifying what that relationship looks like. A school striving for family engagement, on the other hand, tends to lead with its ears. So this means we are listening to what families think, dream, right? What they worry about, and they become true partners. So when we think about this, the goal isn't necessarily participation. I think sometimes in family engagement, we get hung up by the number of names that appear on our sign-in sheets at an event, right? But a lot of times those sign-in sheets tell us a different story. They tell us who's not there. Who are we not reaching? And that number is just a number that equates to participation. It doesn't necessarily identify whether true partnership has been established. So, in order for us to really embrace universal family engagement, we are kind of asking for or talking about three big mindset shifts. So, the first one is shifting from a nice to have to a core strategy. And to do that, it has to be moved out of the extra category and looked at as a core dual level strategy for improving system level culture and classroom level outcomes. So, this is where we have to move beyond what's happening in the classroom, but also look at it from the leadership level to see how schools and districts are working with families to address those bigger cultural barriers. So, everything that kind of surrounds the classroom that might either support or hinder that magic that's taking place within the classroom between those teachers, students, and their families. The other piece, right, the second mindset shift is all about building relationships with families requires digital engagement. Families live digital lives, and we'll look at that even deeper. But in-person activities matter. It's not saying to get rid of them. They matter, but they're just not enough. And how do we use both the digital and person to reinforce each other in beneficial ways? We know that daily digital relationship building is key. And then finally, the last mindset shift has to do with the digital imperative. How digital engagement happens matters tremendously. We know the right tools are just not enough. It's how we use those tools that really matters. It's how we use those tools that helps us move barriers to access and understanding. All right. So now that we've talked a little bit about universal family engagement, let's zoom in deeper on dual level engagement. Dual level family engagement within the classroom and leadership strategy. So, really, it's the interplay of these two levels that allows family engagement to truly support every student. Both initiatives really require coordinated activities that begin at the district leadership level, right? Some of those, the larger level, and then trickle down into the classroom. It's what supports one another. A lot of times when we focus on relationships, and these are the relationships that are important because it's that daily content or contact, we get stuck thinking about just what's happening in the classroom. Um, but at the site and district level, this is where leaders are helping all their staff understand the role they also play with family engagement, right? So that's building that stronger culture around the classroom. Okay, I imagine that these numbers are familiar to all of you on this call today, right? So these are the realities of school today. And there's some of the bigger cultural elements that make school tough. If we're looking at the national chronic absence rate, right, we're at 23%. 46% of youth will experience a mental health disorder. 78% of teachers have considered quitting. We know teacher retention is extremely difficult right now. 21% of students attend high poverty schools. 54% of students now report using AI daily. And then 51% of districts say that they have been disrupted by political polarization. So there are a lot of forces that are making school harder, right? And ultimately, it's not just kind of unrealistic, but it's really unfathomable to think that individual teachers and individual families can overcome these kinds of systemic barriers on their own. We just can't do this alone. And I know everyone on this call knows that. It is truly a community-wide effort. So to do that, we have to remember like this is where that emphasis at the leadership level becomes so critical. It's not optional because we need one another to help overcome some of these barriers. Schools must engage families in two interconnected ways. So we are looking at it, right? At the classroom level, this is where family engagement can really focus in on supporting individual learning. So this is where we have an opportunity to be directly aligned to academic outcomes. How are we helping families figure out what their role is in those in student success, in those student outcomes? Sending home individual things for those families to be able to support their child at home that's linked to the learning happening in the classroom. Around the classroom, this is where we have an opportunity to really build a learning culture that addresses those barriers. This is how we have to take a look at the root causes for things like attendance, well-being, tech, trust. And when those two levels support each other, that's ultimately where we reach student success. All right. So you're thinking like, okay, this is all great, Amanda, but we need some addition, like some real tangible strategies to help make this happen. And so some things that we know, we've spent a lot of time thinking about what is the right recipe for engagement at both levels. Um, so this is where we're shifting a little bit in this presentation to thinking more specifically about the how. On the screen, you see six components that we have thought that makes really the right recipe for high impact engagement at both levels. These are kind of universal truths. You can consider these as sort of the ingredients for strong relationships that really lead to measurable impact. Um, and I want to highlight, they're all incredibly important, but I want to highlight three that we really emphasize as having some of the greatest impact. The first one being personalization. Um, Whenever possible, it is critical to personalize engagement. If you think about this, like when you walk into a room and someone says your name across the room, you're bound to hear it, right? So when we think about how we are engaging families, especially from a communication lens, are we using their name? Are we using a family member's name specifically? Are we referencing something that is specific to that student or family? Um, Personalization can require, you know, a little bit more effort, but really there are tools out there that can automate message but still send it as an individualized, personalized message to families. Families are much more likely to receive and then do something with the information received if it is personalized. The second ingredient that we pay a lot of attention to is positive framing, right? The power of positivity. And I always sort of connect this to thinking about the power of a smile. I'm a firm believer that smiling is contagious. Positive messaging is the same way. It's very easy for us to unintentionally communicate with a negative undertone. A lot of times with families, especially, the first point of contact has to do with something that is a reaction to something that's gone wrong. Or we're reaching out because we need something, we want something, and vice versa. Families are reaching out to us because they need something, they want something, or there's been a problem. And so when you're starting with that, and you're leading from that reactive approach, it's very hard to build a strong relationship that's going to impact the student in a powerful and positive way. So if we are messaging from a positive lens, it really shifts the way that that conversation can go. If you think about even if you think about attendance and absenteeism, a lot of parents and families receive messages that make them feel blamed that their child is not in school. And so, how can we shift that message to let them know that we're here, we're worried about their child, we want to know where they are and how we can help? So, really shifting to that proactive approach with a positive lens versus a reactive approach where we're building into what has existed historically for so long, that blame game between schools and home. And then finally, the last one I want to really point out on here is this idea about actionable information. Um, Schools generally communicate with the greatest of intentions. If we think about teachers who send home these beautiful newsletters, or schools who send home newsletters, or district newsletters, or emails, our hope is we're doing this with the greatest intention, right? We send this information and we're hoping that our families are doing exactly what we want them to do with it. The problem is, and I know from even being a parent, I sometimes read my daughter's newsletters from their teachers, and at the end of it, I go, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this information. What am I supposed to take from this that I can help my child be successful? And so the most important thing we can do is ensure that there is a specific action a family can take with the information that we're sending. So if a response or an action is required, we're ensuring that those steps are simple and clear, right? When I get done with this, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do with this information. I think this is where a lot of times communication in school communities falls into this idea of intention versus impact. We send everything home, we send information home with the greatest of intentions. But when it comes down to it, what is the impact of the messages that we're sending? Are we improving student outcomes? Are we increasing attendance rates? Is what we are sending home leading directly to those outcomes? Or is it because families aren't really sure what to do with that information? Or they're receiving it from a negative lens? Or a lot of times with the personalization, they don't think the information applies to them, right? It didn't say my name, so it must not be me. So when you think about this right recipe for engagement, I really want you to just, keep those in mind. The power of personalization, the power of positive framing, and ensuring that we are sending simple action-oriented messages to our families. All right. So this next piece here is all about the digital imperative. And the reason we want to emphasize this is because we know digital engagement is no longer optional. We can't get around it anymore. I want you to think for a minute about your personal life. All right. Where do you receive all of your messages from people that you truly care about and that you want good things to happen to? Where do you receive messages from your dentist, your doctor? How do you look up your banking information? All of those pieces. Does anybody want to share? Smartphones. Yes. Thank you, Alan. I see it in the chat. Yeah. All right. We live digitally. Okay. We live digitally in nearly every aspect of our life. Um, and if we really leave engagement to rely on only in-person moments, we are going to unintentionally limit anyone who can't participate. But if we think about this, this is just so critical. We live in a world where everything that we need to be able to access has to be doable. It needs to be frequent enough where we're getting those reminders. It needs to be lightweight and it needs to feel like we're building a relationship. So, I almost missed a dentist appointment last week for this very reason, but then I got a text message an hour before saying, see you at 8 a.m., right? That reminder. And I was like, oh my goodness. But I did show up and I was on time because I received the digital reminder. Um, I don't get to see my family very often, but it doesn't mean that I don't send them an emoji or I send my sister an Instagram reel or something just a reminder that I'm thinking about her, that I love her, and that I care about her, right? Building that connective relationship throughout until I get to see her again. So sometimes, we start to look at these digital tools as replacing in-person engagement, but it's really not. It's all about enhancing it and including it's foundational because we have to engage families in ways where they can actually access it. So when we think about this, I want to talk a little about these wraparound strategies. Um, so again, in-person still matters and matters tremendously. And we're not saying that digital replaces in-person, but there's a lot of ways that digital engagement can enhance and improve in-person engagement too. So when you're looking at these wraparounds, there are ways we can use digital engagement to target topics, to boost attendance, to sustain engagement, to gather feedback, and then of course to continuously grow those relationships when you're having that conversation take place on the daily versus just only hearing from your child's teacher. at conference time or at progress report time. Um, but the one I really want to point out, there's two I want to point out. The first one is boosting attendance. And again, if you think about my dentist appointment last week, I was highly likely that I was going to forget to show up because I had forgotten to put it in my calendar. But that text message that reminded me an hour before my appointment ensured that I was there. And so we know that sending out those reminders digitally before something in person can boost attendance significantly, right? It increases turnout to those events. The other one that always matters to me so much, and I think is one of the biggest places where we can help families feel more comfortable at school, is using these digital wraparounds to address logistics. So I like to think about it this way. Schools kind of operate on hidden handshakes, right? If you're a teacher, an educator, an administrator, anybody who works at the school, when you get to the school, you know where to park, you know what door to go in, you know what to say when you ring the bell when you get there, or chances are you probably have an access key to get in. You know how to dress, you know what to expect. But if you think about that from a family lens, families don't have answers to all of those questions. And a lot of times we forget to include those details in our initial invitations. So I might be a family who really wants to attend this event, but I'm so worried about where I'm going to park when I get there that I just decide not to come. Or I'm so worried about what to wear that I'm going to decide not to come. Um, or I have no idea which door I'm going to enter. So something as simple as sending a photograph, right? Snapping a quick picture, texting it out saying, when you get here, here's the door that you go in. When you come inside, you're going to see so and so. Mr. Stewart's going to lead you to the auditorium where we'll start our conversation. So addressing some of those logistics in really quick, simple text messages allows us to kind of bring families in on those hidden handshakes that we sort of take for granted when we are educators who are just used to that space. Um, but letting them know what to expect and helping them kind of get there makes it feel a lot less intimidating to then come to these events in person. So just a few things to think about as you are using digital wraparounds to really enhance in-person events. All right. The last big piece today is looking at and talking about how we can maximize impact from digital engagement, right? This is sort of the section on digital engagement done right. What does this actually look like? What does this actually feel like? And there is a clear recipe for just that. Um, there's a formula for digital engagement at both levels that we like to emphasize and use at Talking Points, and it just works. And so we're going to break it down step by step for you. And I really want you to consider that the order of this matters. If you think about it as a recipe, right? Just like ingredients, kind of the order of ingredients matters as well. All right, so we call this the 4 steps for impact. And just like a recipe, if you leave out one ingredient or you do things out of orders, it doesn't really turn out the way that you have intended. So here is the sequence of this recipe. The first one, the very first step in this 4 steps to impact is reach. You can't get to student improvement or student outcomes or anything that we ultimately want, our main goal in education, right? If you can't reach families first. And reach means using the most accessible channels to ensure that every family can be included, like text messaging. Once you have reached families, you can then move to step 2, which is communicate. Communication means that you are having two-way, understandable back and forth dialogue, right? Now that you have reached families, you're communicating with them. Now you can move to engage. Communication opens the door, engagement invites families in. So step 3 is engagement. And this is where you are really building those trusted relationships that form when we know communication's positive, personalized, and meaningful. And then finally, after all of those, you get to step 4, which is improvement. That is where we start to see the link to improving school culture, looking at improving student outcomes, attendance, enrollment, all of those things that we're working so hard to do. But we can't improve any of those things until we have been able to reach our families, communicate with them, and then build those trusting relationships. So let's break down those steps just a little bit more in depth. The first step being reach. This is often the biggest barrier to family participation. It isn't interest. It isn't that families don't care. It's just a matter of access. And so, what we know is research tells us that 99% of families can be reached if there are no downloads or other access barriers. So, defaulting to text message is truly the first and most accessible way to reach families. We also know there's a lot of cognitive psychology around this idea of reach. So, we as adults now, for better or for worse, tend to fall in what we call the habit loop theory, which means we check our phones within 3 minutes to see if we have new notifications, often specifically to see if we have new text notifications. So it's almost a guarantee that if something comes to us in the form of a text message, we're going to see it because the way that our brains are now sort of just programmed to check our phones every 3 minutes. Text messaging, it appears right there. Messages are simple. It's not a lot of information to read at one time. We don't have to access an email. We don't have to open a portal. It comes directly to us. So text messaging is truly the most effective way to communicate with families, almost guaranteed information that they will be reached. Now that we have reached families, now we need to think about how are we communicating with them? And what we know is that one-way updates won't do it. Okay. Strong partnerships have to begin with real conversation, which means that it has to be two-way. It has to be understandable. We also know that reaching isn't enough if families cannot understand and respond. So this also requires two-way translation in a familiar home language and also at accessible literacy levels, right? 1 in 5, that means 22% of families have a non-English preferred language. Some districts that we work with report over having 100 languages spoken by the families in their district. So it's incredibly important to be sure that every family is receiving that information with that two-way translation so it's understandable. So maybe that it comes to the family in their native home language and then goes back to the teacher in English without any sort of access barriers or understandable barriers going in between. Um, we also need to be sure that there's a place for families to engage in that conversation, right? So that it's two-way. They have the opportunity to respond and share and communicate. Once we have done that, now communication has opened that door. Now there's some trust in place because families are like, oh wow, I can understand this message. This is meant for me. And so now they're ready to become partners. With that, that means too, we can build that partnership up even faster and even stronger if we ensure that the messages that we're sending, the communication that we are sending is positive, it's personalized, and it's action oriented. So families know exactly what to expect. We want information to go to them in a positive way so we can avoid the blame game, right? So they understand how that we truly want to be in a real partnership with them. And when we keep it simple and clearly state what we're asking families to do, they know how to support and respond. When all of those things happen, this is when we get to that step of improve, right? This is the why. Once engaged, we know that we have the power to improve school culture and student outcomes. But before we can improve any of those things, we have to reach, we have to communicate, and we have to engage first. Once we're able to do that, we've seen things like a 20% plus increase in attendance and a 7% potential improvement in academics. So a digital engagement tool must provide purpose-driven messaging and data focused on creating a learning culture and improving student outcomes. But to do that, all of those other pieces have to be done first. This is just the research that shows us when we do those things right, we see a big difference for students. I also want to mention here too, when you're thinking about academic focused digital engagement, when we talk a little bit more about from that classroom level, when it comes to really math and literacy. And we know that these are huge points of pressure and accountability for districts, right? Families want to support that, but again, it's a matter of how. And sometimes when we send home like general messages that say something like, read with your child, well, that may look different or feel different, or for a family feel a little bit overwhelming. So this is again, as we are sending out these academic messages, especially related around math and literacy, just really sort of considering four main things so that families are feeling confident to really be able to assist their child. So we want to be sure that it's clear, right? Focus just on one skill or goal at a time. That makes it feel more manageable. We want to be sure that we are giving families realistic ways to support learning at home. That's the actionable piece. So this is through conversation, encouragement, giving them things that can be done kind of in their regular busy lives, not something that feels like a whole extra responsibility or something that feels like, wait a minute, I don't want to replace the job of the teacher. We also want it to be positive. We want to build their confidence and motivation to support learning, not add any additional pressure or anxiety around supporting their child's learning at home. And then, of course, especially around academics, we want it to be consistent, right? So, not just once in a blue moon where we're asking them to help support their child's learning, but it's woven into the school year rhythm. Something they can do, a little something they can do every day that's already built into their schedule, where it seems natural, right? It creates that predictable rhythm for families to support at home. So really, when we think about this, this is a major mindset shift for districts. We have to shift our system-wide mindset from communication to academic partnership to partnership around student success. And especially with that academic lens, we know that when it is anchored in math and literacy, it becomes a way to reinforce learning habits, confidence, and expectations across the district. So I kind of want to tie all of these pieces together. Here's your three key takeaways from our conversation today. The first, we know that family partnerships are foundational to student success. They are not optional. We know that communication is one of the most powerful system levers we have. Words matter tremendously, and how we communicate everything and how we build up communication in those relationships between home and school is incredibly powerful when it comes to student success. And then finally, when done, when we use intention, when we use with intention, reliable digital communication solutions, just like Talking Points, enables us to build consistent, inclusive family partnership at scale. So when families know it's reliable, they know that it's predictable, they know what to expect, we have a 99% rate of reaching them, that's when those partnerships really start to build out and start to show an impact on students. All right. So I just briefly want to talk a little bit if, that's sort of the overview of all those best practices about why family engagement and family partnerships is truly a superpower. And I want to just take a minute to let you know a little bit more about talking points, and I'll have Jake kind of chime in a few minutes here. But again, as mentioned, all of these things are basically what drive the research and foundation of our tool. So, Talking Points is a nonprofit. It's the only platform with both impact focus and funding model to realize those four steps, right? And our solution truly enables the practice of universal family engagement. So again, I'm going to bring us back to those four steps that I spoke about. But when we have built our solution around these four steps. So if you think about this, that first step, reach, is again, that's where it has to start. We have to be able to access families. So Talking Points is a text first model. We have a reach rate of 99% because we know that texting works. And we also have a 1%, less than 1% opt-out rate. So a lot of times when you look at families that you're not able to communicate and connect with, that rate is much higher in districts. With that, when we move to step two of communicate, we have over 150 languages available for that K through 12 contextualized translation. All of our translation is human backed. That means that our families are receiving messages in their home language and then it's and going back to educators in English. So there's never a delay, and that under it just automatically becomes easier to understand immediately. It also allows for two-way dialogue, back and forth dialogue, right? To be able to respond. With that too, um, Talking Points is centered around engagement. Once we've reached them, now we're communicating with them. Now it's time to engage. So our platform is all backed by research. It has embedded coaching and family engagement best practices within the solution, within the platform itself. And everything that we use is really is rooted in building trust between home and school. And so then with that, we have seen an improvement in attendance rates. We have helped streamline attendance workflows. We've seen an improvement in academic outcomes and student well-being. So we have seen these 4 steps to impact in action. All right. I am going to turn it over to Jake to tell you a little bit more about some of our stats. And Jake, feel free to add anything in there that I missed. But hopefully you all have, received something that you can walk away with from our conversation today. And I'll jump back on in just a minute.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Amanda. Hey, everyone. Happy to share a little bit more about Talking Points and the software that we utilize over here at Talking Points. And so I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. A couple things as we get started that I just want to reiterate and point out. What we're seeing is schools with strong family engagement see about 30 to 40% higher success rates in math and literacy. We're seeing 40% lower chronic absenteeism across the board. Strong family engagement is 2 times more predictive than socioeconomic status for outcomes in education as well. So that's really, really impactful there. We also see about a half a year additional learning time for schools and districts that have strong family engagement. And so how do we do that with Talking Points? And so I just want to show you a little bit of the software that we have. And so we are a completely opt-out text-first model. What that means is that your parents are going to receive their messages as a text message, and they'll receive those messages in their home language. So we service over 150 languages with Talking Points. But staff would use our application or our web portal. They would send a message to a family member, guardian, even a student. That recipient would receive the message in their home language. They can respond back, and it'll go back to English to the person sending them the message at the school or district. This is the app right here. So this is the teacher app where you'll send messages from. From here, super easy to use. We do integrate with student information systems. I know a lot of folks in New Jersey use Genesis, so we've got you covered there. We've got Skyward covered. Really anything that you throw at us, we've got you covered. A teacher will see just their students that they have linked to them, but we can also send messages to classes and groups. You can create groups for really anyone that you would want to send messages to in your ecosystem, in your district. And I will see those groups populated here, right? So it's just simple for teachers to use to be able to choose who they want to send messages to. I can send messages to family contacts or family contacts and students or just students. This would be applicable if you were going to do like moving basketball practice from the lower gym to the upper gym or something like that. Family contacts, that's really our bread and butter here. We'll send messages. We can send attachments. We can send a video or an image. A video will give you closed captions to the native language of the recipient of that video. The video will also live on a Talking Point server, so it's not going to cause any, you guys will not have to host that. We also add files from Google Drive. We can do polls. So this is a great way to get more of a culture check from your parents. We can also do things like personalization. So one of the points that Amanda made was that we want to make sure that the message that we send are very personalized. And so we do have some shortcuts to send messages: student first name, last name, contact name, teacher name, those sorts of fields. You can also utilize templates. So we do have some templates in here. I'll just show you one: positive message. So I am so happy to have a student in my classes here. Let me know at any time if they need any extra support. These positive messages are really great to send out just to build a relationship with the family so that when you do get to a point where there might be some kind of issue, they're more likely to work with you than resist. Now, another thing that we talked about with talking points is just the ability to create capacity for your teachers. So we realize, a teacher that's working with 25, 30 students, that's a lot of messages to send. Um, let's say there's an incident or something and you need to send a lot of these messages, but you want to be really careful about what you send. You want to send a message that's going to be really impactful. We've got you covered there with some tools that'll help. I think the best tool that I can speak on, right, is this. Say we have an incident, we've got a student who is just misbehaving. So I could even write something as elementary as Jax was a jerk today, right? You would never in a million years send that message. Get a lot of resistance. But what I can do is I can go ahead and click this message. I can, of course, edit for spelling and grammar, craft new message, but I'm going to use my message revision here. Really important what this message revision is doing. So this revision is based on the work of Dr. Karen Mapp. She sits on our board. She is one of the graduate professors over at Harvard. A really work really is a foremost thought leader family. She devised this formula. So what we have here, so we've got hello, parent full name. Today, student had a hard showing kindness to others. This can be harder to learn and make friends. Please talk with student about being respectful. Let me know how I can help. The formula is this. It's what are we reaching out about? Why is this important? The third piece of this puzzle that is probably the most important is the action step. And so what this revision will do is parent that next step forward so they don't feel lost. A lot of resistance is caused by parents really not knowing that next step to take, and this can really help. I'm just going to jump. So another thing that we really want to think about when we are communicating with parents, we want to make sure that they're getting our message. And so I can just jump down here to our analytics, scroll down. I can see my valid phone number. So this is really important here to see, okay, who are we reaching? Who are we not reaching? I could download this information into a SX file and then you send a note home with the student, talk to that parent at pickup, whatever that needs to look like so that I can get that valid phone number so we can reach that parent or guardian. I can also see my subscribed families. And so one thing I do want to mention is that Talking Points is a completely opt-out texting platform. And what that means, is that parents will not have to download an app. They're not going to have to opt into anything. They will receive your message. They would literally have to opt out to opt out. We see a less than 1% opt out rate across the board. Usually that is a mistake. So, we field questions from time to time like, hey, can you reset this person in Talking Points? We certainly can do that because parents want to know what's going on at school. They want to be in communication with their teacher. The breakdown is typically when there's an app involved or there's, email sent back and forth. What happens in those cases is that the messages look the same and they're sent from the same sender is what it looks like. So a district message about, hey, our ball game sent to an elementary school parent who needs a message from their teacher, but if they look the same, they're not checking those messages. With Talking Points, everyone will have a phone number that's given to them from Talking Points. That's a specific number to that teacher, to that coordinator, to that principal. And so that when a parent receives that message, they're going to know who it is, and it's going to be very clear via a text message, which is how we're all used to communicating as well. Couple other things that I do want to mention about Talking Points. So one thing is that we do have a way to track messages in your ecosystem at the school level and at the district level. And so this is really important for administrators to be able to have a record of the messages that are sent back and forth. We also flag messages. And so if anything inappropriate is said or there's talk of violence or anything like that, you're going to flag, it's going to get flagged and you're going to see it so you can take that appropriate action. One other thing that I'll mention is that we do save messages for the entirety of our partnership. So, if there's some kind of court case or something where you need a conversation from a few years ago, we've got you covered there. So you'll definitely have those. Can also see things like my scheduled messages. And then I've got analytics at the school level and at the district level. The most important of which is probably this is messages sent over time. So I can see things like my staff DMs, I can see staff announcements, and then I've got this line right here, which tracks my family responses. And so ultimately what you want to see is these lines get closer and closer together. From the school and the district level, we can also send mass messages. And so this is really good if there is a message that needs to go out, or in the case of an emergency alert, if we need to send an emergency alert, we can do that. So you can add emergency alert templates. I can send messages in an email or a call as well, and I can post to my. I can do both of these at the school and the district level. Now, really important, our bread and butter is communicating with families. And so we do have some other tools in here. Add groups. I know this is a really important one for a lot of teachers, is to be able to easily add groups. So it's super easy. You just click this classes and groups. I can add my group here. I can choose what do we want to name this? So we'll just call this football team. Go ahead and create that, add students. And so this is going to give me a list of students from the school that I can add to the football team. And so it's not going to just be dependent on if they're connected to you in your classroom when you're creating a group. One question that we get quite a bit is, hey, if I have a student, say I'm a third grade teacher, that student moves to fourth grade. Can that family still send me messages through Talking Points? Well, the short answer is no, they cannot if they are not connected to you in the SIS. And so you don't have to worry about folks just having a number to always communicate with you. It's just going to be the students that are in a group that you're utilizing or in your class that will be able to connect with you. For coordinators, you will have expanded access. And so we'll have access to the students and the families that you need to access to send messages to. Of course, I do have some other tools here to do things like send quick kudos here. These would be things like hard work, kindness. And so these are great tools just to really kind of make a deposit in that relationship bank so that we can make sure that we're reinforcing our relationship with our parents. I know we are very short on time. Would love to dig into this further. We do have some special pricing and some specials that we can do through New Jersey Family Engagement Hub. For anyone that is interested, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put a link to schedule some time with me in the. Feel free to click that link, schedule some time, and I'll be happy to really dive deeper into Talking Points and what we have to offer and what we do over here.
Thank you. Thank you, Jake.
Absolutely.
So he's the expert in all of those things. So I'm so glad that he was able to share some of the coolest features and all the things that really makes Talking Points stand out, but also just where I truly believe from an educator lens, just it's all about impact, right? There's lots of messaging systems out there. There's lots of things about that, but that's why we always like to start out with best practices, because that's truly what our solution is built on and things we really believe in. I am also going to put a form in the chat, and maybe I can have someone send it out later. We are trying to add an evaluation to our professional learning sessions. So I'm going to say that you guys are actually my first group. Professional learning is new to Talking Points this year, and they finally have an evaluation form. So we're going to add this evaluation form, and it'll give me some feedback on your biggest takeaways, things that you walked away with around research and best practices. So I'm going to stick that in the chat as well now. And if you have a moment, I would be extremely grateful to receive your feedback, because it would only help me get better as a presenter, as I want you to walk away with as many things that you can implement immediately around family engagement. So with that, I just want to say thank you all for making time for us today. If you have any questions, you know how to reach Jake, and we can share my contact information with you as well. I just answer more about the strategy lens rather than the tool itself. But I really appreciate your time and making family engagement important in all that you do. So I will leave it there.
This is Lanisha.
Thank you, Lanisha.
Thank you all for joining today. Thank you to Talking Points as well for sharing the information. Amanda and Jake, we love working with you guys. And everyone on the call, we hope that what you heard is interesting and exciting, and that you will join us in our partnership with Talking Points. With that being said, thank you and have a great rest of your day.